Welcome. I'm David Wallinga, Director of Healthy Food Action, and today is the third in our four-part webinar series on food, justice, and health equity. I want to especially thank the series co-sponsors, the American Public Health Association, the National Medical Association, and the National Black Nurses Association, along with Healthy Food Action. Excuse me. Healthy Food Action is a nationwide network created to bring a single voice to health professionals across disciplines so they can advocate together for the farm and food systems that we all want. Systems that are both healthier and more sustainable, that respect the sovereignty of indigenous peoples. Making sure the webinar runs smoothly today is my colleague, Rachel Gruelle. I just got off my place in the webinar, so 2 seconds here. After our great lineup of speakers, we've got around 25 minutes of Q&A, so I want to do some logistics on how to lodge your questions with us. Don't wait. As soon as you think of a question, putting it in the system is better earlier than later. So look on the right-hand menu of your screen for the box that says Enter Question. Just type your question in and then hit Send. And then Rachel will moderate the questions at the end. Today's moderator is Dr. Maile Taualii, and I hope I said that right. Dr. Taualii is an assistant professor and chair of Native Hawaiian and Indigenous Health at the University of Hawaii, where she brings cultural, ethical, and community-oriented perspectives to the instruction of public health. There's a lot more to her bio that you can read on our website. Miley?
Aloha, everyone. Thank you so much, David and Rachel, for the opportunity to be part of this webinar. It's a real pleasure to get to help to facilitate this wonderful group of speakers and to help to get the questions out so that we can have a good conversation afterwards. So thank you so much for allowing me to participate. I have the pleasure of introducing the topic. Many people may not necessarily understand how the connections between sovereignty and food systems are there for indigenous people throughout the world. And so I thought what I might be able to do is kind of outline that a little bit for you folks. So I hope you can all see my screen. I'm doing a Prezi. But what you see in front of you is a conceptual model that I just sort of drafted up real quickly that just sort of outlines in really simplistic format the connection between colonization and poor health outcomes. So you'll see on the far left-hand side on the top bar, you'll see colonization, which has an effect of cultural and historical trauma on a people, and that leads to many factors, some of which are racism, hopelessness, poor quality of life, invisibility, oppression. The idea of being worthless in your own traditional lands is a huge impact of colonization and the trauma affected by that. And then the outcome, sorry about that, the outcome of that, oh no, is poor disease, disease and poor health outcomes. Oh, sorry. So we see poor health, and so when we talk about traditional food systems, we see it as an intervention, and that intervention is on the place in between colonization and historical trauma. We can't really remove the effects of historical trauma, but we can do an intervention to help to address some of the effects of colonization, and the number one way we do that is returning to land. And by returning to land through traditional food systems and the indigenous knowledge of relationships to land, you see this bottom pathway instead, an alternative pathway, in which you lead from the pride in reclaiming traditional food systems and indigenous knowledge can lead to self-determination, justice issues, restorative justice, and that becomes sort of the output of that is we have visibility, and we see identity, and we see hope again in the community, and that has a direct effect on the ability to then decide to be well, because we see health and wellness as both a relationship between the role of indigenous people to take claims over reclaiming their wellness, as well as the systems around us to support wellness. So that's sort of a really simplistic view of it. And I'm so sorry, but I'm having a little bit of a technical difficulty with my slides. Hopefully, I'll just keep talking. So what happens in part of this view of Indigenous people is the relationship between traditional health systems has to do with traditional knowledge and the belief in one's role as an Indigenous person and the relationships that one has to the land is the root of that. And for the Hawaiian people, much of that comes from the story of Haloa Nakalau Kapalili. This is a creation story that Hawaiians look to as the firstborn human being was born stillborn and placed in the earth, and from his body came kalo, which is our staple crop. The second child was born human and healthy and alive, and that became the first human being. And so the relationship between our food and our people has to do with the relationship between siblings, older brother, younger sibling. So when people talk about the connection to food, it's not simply, oh, this is the food that we like to eat. This is blood relatives. This is the connection between siblings and family. It's what makes the connection real, and that's why returning to traditional food systems is such an important part of reclaiming that identity and that wellness. So that's kind of what we're doing today, is we're making efforts to return to Aina, and this is a photo of my daughter in her Aina, in her lo'i in Kaneohe, where she is. This is on her birthday. Every birthday that my children have, they spend in the lo'i connecting back to their ancestors. So it's a really important part of what we do. So that's kind of the framework, and I hope that that makes I hope that that makes sense, and I would be very welcome to go back over this causal model with folks after the panelists speak, with the idea that if you have questions specifically about the relationships and how they relate to them, we can definitely discuss that in greater detail. But before I go on, I do want to introduce the speakers who will be talking today on the call. We are very sad that Valerie is not going to be able to join us. She is having some family issues that she needs to attend to, and we want to give her all of our support. But Valerie is an amazing woman who's doing wonderful work out of Washington State. She works with the Muckleshoot tribe and has done some amazing things. I'm going to read her bio. Although she's not on the call, I still want to pay respects to the fact that she is part of the family of Indigenous wellness. Valerie is a native nutrition educator who specializes in local and traditional foods. As an enrolled member of the Muckleshoot Indian tribe, she serves her community as the coordinator of the Muckleshoot Food Sovereignty Project and also works for the Northwest Indian College Traditional Plants Program as a nutrition educator. In 2010, she co-authored the book Feeding the People, Feeding the Spirit, Revitalizing Northwest Coast Indian Food Culture. Valerie received a bachelor's in science and nutrition from Bastyr University in 2009 and a master's degree in environmental and community from Ektiah College or University. She is a fellow for the Institute of Agriculture and Trade Policy. Valerie inspires and enlightens others about the importance of nutrient-dense diet through simple, common-sense approach to eating. So we wish Valerie the best of luck in handling her family issues and health. So we want to put her in our prayers. But after I share a little bit about what's going on in here in Hawaii, we're going to turn it over to Terrell D. Johnson, who is a wonderful speaker who's going to talk a little bit about what's going on in his community in the Tohono O'odham Nation in southern Arizona. So I'm just going to read his bio. For more than 15 years, Terrell Johnson has been creating innovative responses to epidemic rates of nutrition-related diseases on the Tohono O'odham Nation in southern Arizona. As a co-founder and president of the Tohono O'odham Community Action, TOCA, he has led efforts to revitalize a tribal food system that promotes healthy, culturally appropriate foods in one of the poorest communities in the United States. With work that ranges from founding 2 farms that grow traditional crops and programs that introduce healthy tribal foods into school lunches to revitalizing the tribe's cultural traditions that promote healthy living. Terrell has inspired a new generation of tribal members to create a brighter future. In 2009-2010, Terrell walked from Bay Harbor, Maine to his home in Sells, Arizona to bring awareness on how Native American families and communities can take control of their health by embracing tribal and other healthy foods. So we're really excited to have Carol on the phone with us. And our final speaker for today is Simone Senegal. Sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly. Simone is the Food Sovereignty Program Coordinator at the Indigenous Environmental Network in Bemidji. She is a mixed-race heritage Argentinian and Anishinabe and is dedicated to bringing people together across boundaries by building strong connections around food, health, and well-being. Her work is based upon the understanding that food systems are one of the many interconnected spheres of indigenous life and been disrupted by genocide, colonization, capitalism, historical trauma, and racism, and that the revitalization of traditional food systems go hand in hand with the health and vitality of all aspects of life. I'm really excited to hear Simone speak as well because I think her and I view this relationship between historical trauma and traditional food systems. I think she has kind of inspired me in putting together my own conceptual model around that, so I'm really excited. So because Valerie isn't going to be on the call today, I asked for just if I could take a few minutes to share a little bit about what's going on in Hawaii. This is not a program that I necessarily run. I have the actual great fortune of being a parent involved in this. I'm a community member, although I do have my professor hat on in some roles in this program because a number of my students serve as helpers to the students who are in this program. But my primary role is as parent and community member, so I'm sharing this from that perspective, but got permission from the agency to share about their organization and the efforts that we're making here in Hawaii. So the organization is called Papahana Kua'ola. It is a nonprofit organization in Kaneohe. Here's a photo of some of the land, my daughter in the front. And the mission of the organization is to create quality educational programs focused on environmental restoration and economic sustainability, fully integrated with Hawaiian knowledge in order to exemplify a lifestyle respectful of Kanaka, Aina, and Akua. Kanaka means Hawaiians are of man, and land and Akua, land and God. So these are our kids, our keiki on the land. They spend 3 days out of the week, and I'm going to talk a little bit about their program next. The values of Kiko'oko'ola, or of Papahana Kua'ola, are through teaching Hawaiian practices and values. Hawaiian cultural programming should cultivate a positive sense of self, kinship relationship to land, a purposeful sense of place in the ohana, Hawaii, and the globe, a consciousness of Kanaka's relationship and Kuleana to self, each other, and the land. Papahana Kua'ola believes that Aina-based programming should be called for, developed, assessed, and supported by the community. It's engaging. So that's actually a huge part of my role, is I am a community member, and my children and my students are involved, and that's how we support this organization and this program. So the program that the kids are participating in is an after-school program. It's an Aina-based after-school program for students that promote sustainability in their food resources, food security, and health, while also sustaining and strengthening Hawaiian identity. The theoretical framework is based on this olelo no iao. He ali'i ka aina, he kuava, he kanaka. Land is chief and man is its servant. So this idea that the land is what we serve, and that is our responsibility is a huge part of the framework that our children are learning in. The program involves primarily mahi'ai kalo, where they are learning to farm the aina. They are learning about the relationship to haloa, which is the ancestor that I showed you about, the child that was born, which is also our kalo. They learn about the area in their area, which is Waipau, the valley in which they're spending their time, and they learn about food security. They learn about the importance of how to grow, cultivate, and take care of a food system that will sustain them. In addition to mahi'ai, gardening and being on the land, they also get this other component which helps to round out. You can't have land-based systems without the culture to support it, and the way that our children are embracing this is through song, or mele, literary traditions, information about land, and our connection to land. So it's really important that they are learning about the songs and the chants that connect them to the land, because they need to know the stories, and the language is part of that. They are also learning how to weave lauhala, which is the practices of how to be beautiful, how to beautify things, as well as the functional, mundane practices. So they are learning how to use the aina and how to benefit and share with the aina. And they're also learning about the families and the traditions around lauhala. And they also are learning hula. They're learning hula, which is dance, in tradition to the songs of the area, the chants that they're learning, and it helps them to understand the stories by putting physical motion to it. But all of these things are very physically active. The kids, you know, we don't have to integrate a PE component, because every aspect of it is physical. The kids swim, they dig, they are on the ground, they are on the land, and they are being healthy by just simply practicing traditions. And here are some of the voices from our families. A student of mine did a focus group pre and post of one of the programs to get a better sense of how changes were happening in the family. And so I want to read a few of these quotes to you before I wrap it up. So I'm going to read just a few that I think are just fabulous. These are all fabulous, but some of them are really transformative. A transformation, this last one. The other transformation is that she asked to ku'i this week at home, which is huge because we ku'i every week, about twice a week, and it's usually like pulling teeth to get her to ku'i. Ku'i is the traditional pounding of kalo, and the kids are learning how to prepare food traditionally, and that's some of the transformation. This is a 7-year-old girl who is helping to prepare food for her family in a traditional way, and that transformation is a really important component, that our kids are seeing it not as a punishment, but as a gift and something that they can give back to their families. Ike means vision or to see. So I'm going to read a couple from here. He learns about how important it is to care, to malama the aina, that he can make a difference in the importance of food and healthy food, and understanding what it takes to grow healthy food and get an appreciation for healthy food, is a quote from one of the parents. The goal is to teach my kids how to be self-sustainable so they can grow their own food and they can live off the land, and the land can sustain and nourish them if they have a relationship with it. So you get a sense that you know, these are our children, that they are understanding the full aspects of those relationships. Here's another example. This is some quotes about the relationship in community. It reinforces what they learn at school. Many of the children are in a Hawaiian immersion program. It reinforces the values we have at home, what we want to impart on them, not just doing, but the whole idea of service learning and giving back to the community and strengthening yourself. And this is one of my favorite quotes. It's in our communities to know what's better than us to know how to do is right. Our communities have that knowledge, and to privilege and to support that knowledge is a huge part of what we want to see happen. And then some other quotes that I think are really important is about identity. Their Hawaiian identity has strengthened so much. Over here, they are strengthening their identity, their knowledge, reinforcing everything that we do at home, reinforcing everything they learn at school. Lessons he's learned and brought home, a stronger sense of place and identity. He's so much more grounded. Now, when you look back at that causal model that I put together in the very beginning, this is how we actually can see, and it wasn't a curriculum that enforced this. The curriculum is being on the land. The curriculum is growing the food. The curriculum is preparing the food traditionally. They're not being taught. They are being taught, but they're not being taught about, here's your identity back. They're just being. They're being Hawaiian, and they're being on the land, and in that they get this benefit. They return to that identity. So just right before I close and finish up my portion of it, I just want to briefly just mention some of the challenges of programs like this. Since this is not a research program, because it's not necessarily something that gets investigated like the way academic institutions can participate in programs like this, there's not a lot of funding to support it. There are some dollars from different organizations that help to support it, but primarily they are struggling for funds in order to really grow the efforts of the area. Some of the challenges that we face are transportation. The kids are only a mile away, but that mile is a dirt road where there's a lot of cars going up and down, and so we need to figure out a way to get kids safely to the place where they can be. Staffing is always a challenge that we would like to be able to have more resources so that there were more staff that could be there every day after the week, because this is after school, and instead of the kids being in sort of a daycare-like program, we think that this is so much better for them to be on the land and doing things that are really healthy for them, but there's not enough resources to support it that many days. And just the fact that the entire cost, or a huge part of the cost, is shouldered by both the organization and the parents. Like I said, we don't have a lot of funds to support this. This is because the parents are struggling to do this. And as a result, not a lot of parents can participate in it as much as who would desire to participate and who could benefit from it. So we would love to see programs like this receive funding. So that is basically the end of my talk, and I welcome any questions you have about the organization, about what we're doing, about what's working, about how we in the university help to support that by helping to do an evaluation of what was going on so that the organization could use it to describe what was happening. So I'm going to stop now and turn it over to Terrell, who's going to talk about the wonderful work that's going on in his community. It sounds like they are doing some amazing things as well. So I'm going to ask Rachel to take over. Thank you so much. So I'm going to turn it over to Terrell. Terrell, it's up to you now.
All right, cool. Well, thank you so much, Molly. My name is Terrell D. Johnson. I am from the Tohono O'odham Nation, located in southern Arizona, right on the U.S.-Mexico border. We're the second largest reservation in the country. And the organization that I helped co-found years ago was pretty much based on everything that Molly had said about what the purpose of going back to traditional foods were. Tohono O'odham Community Action is a nonprofit organization based here in the village of Cells on the nation, the Tohono O'odham Nation. And it basically started from a small, less than an acre community garden where we worked with kids in the neighborhood. I myself am a weaver. I'm a basket weaver, a traditional basket weaver, and I was teaching out of my home basket weaving, and the kids that were taking my class after they were done would go over to this community garden. And the community garden was started by a non-native person that was on the reservation, and he was stationed there with his wife. They were missionaries, and they were really interested in growing or just gardening in general. But since they were in a new area, I think for them to relate to the community, they decided to grow traditional foods, and so they were doing research and gotten seeds. And the kids that were going to the garden from my class were really interested and got me interested in the traditional foods. For myself, I grew up, I was very fortunate to grow up with my grandparents who were medicine people and were herbalists and knew about the foods of the land. And, you know, to go over to grandma's house and eat stickers or eat something from the desert was normal for me. So I grew up being very familiar with these foods and thinking that, you know, everybody else was. And we'll go to the next slide. I don't know if I'm doing that. So, you know, from our garden, it just grew. You know, people were really interested in traditional foods and really wanted to get them and use them, and that was one of the things that we were facing when we were telling people to eat more traditional foods. You know, go out into the desert and pick wild foods. You know, start a garden and grow cultivated foods like beans, melons, squash, and corn. But we found out that a lot of people couldn't get that stuff. They couldn't get squash. They couldn't get beans. back in the early 50s, you know, on the reservation, each village were producing their own foods like beans, squash, and corn. And they estimated about 1.5 million pounds of beans was grown in that time. But over the years, because of boarding schools, because of the world wars, because of the government coming in and telling us to be mechanics, be secretaries, be this and that, people started moving away from the gardens. And so when we started back in the mid-90s, we could not get over 100 pounds of beans. So we actually started growing our tepary beans. These tepary beans are actually drought resistant. The less water that they have and the heat of the summer. And in the summer in Arizona, especially on my reservation, it gets to maybe 115, 120. And so that's really good, and these beans actually thrive in these conditions. And so the less water and the more heat they get, the more they produce in beans. And so we started growing these. And so when the program started promoting traditional foods and helping families start gardens and actually helping communities start gardens, the beans were being available more and more. And since us growing beans, we started growing about maybe 10,000 pounds a year of beans, along with squash, along with corn, but then also thinking about the wild foods that are out in our area, like our cholla buds, our saguaro fruits, things like that, mesquite beans. And so we actually started having classes where we would take young people from the community out for a day and bring them back, and then actually have an elder come and teach us how to process and how to cook and how to eat the wild foods and the traditional foods. And so that just grew and grew, and then we started becoming a place of a resource for community members. And, you know, again, just working in the community. Next slide. Was what we did, you know, and it wasn't that we planned to do that, it just sort of fell into place. Things just happened. And, you know, working with elders and having them from the community come and teach classes and talk about the traditions of these foods and where they came from and the value of them. So going back to our beans, you know, we always say you're not just looking at a bean, you're looking at the entire culture of the Tohono O'odham people. Because with that being, not only are you just planting it, you have to actually bless the seeds. You have to sing traditional songs. You need songs to bless the ground. And once you do that, then again, it's taking care of the plant and nurturing the plant until it's ready to be harvested. So those things are really important for us or an organization in revitalizing the foods. And we do that through foods, we do that through the songs, we do that through the language, we do it through the arts. And so it's really important. Next slide. So again, we just started making this idea available for people. You know, a lot of people are, again, well, where can I get the squash? Where can I get the beans? And so we started, moving from that little small garden to a bigger farm where we actually had irrigated water, where, again, we started growing only traditional foods like beef squash. And in the slide here, you see a classroom actually taking a field trip and spending the day out in their farm picking squash. And what they did later was take it back to the classroom, and we later arranged a day where we could go in and actually have someone there teach them how to process it and actually cook it. And one thing that we found out when we started going into the schools, that a lot of the kids weren't familiar with these foods. And so we actually noticed that, again, you know, a lot of these kids, especially with their palates, weren't used to these kind of foods, real foods. They were used to a lot more fast foods and processed foods. And so we found out that we actually had to, again, reawaken their palates and reteach them what real foods taste like. And so, again, we started working in the schools where, again, we would hire elders, but we also would bring in people to to teach these ways, preparing of these foods, and it became very successful. And to this point right now, we actually are in most of the schools on the reservation, government and tribal schools, where we are having them serve traditional foods a few times a week. We are working on the pilot program where we are starting a food service where, again, we are going to be working with the schools or any kind of program on the reservation that has a food program where we can take over that service and provide traditional foods on a daily basis to the community members on the reservation. Next slide. Again, we also started with the schools, and we actually started with them with having gardens in the school grounds. And so one thing that we noticed was that, again, a lot of the kids weren't familiar with these traditional foods, and not only with traditional foods, but modern foods, I guess, like carrots and broccoli and things like that. And so kids were really excited to find out that a carrot actually grows in the ground. We actually had kids come to us and say, I didn't know carrots grew from the ground. I always thought they just get them at the supermarket, which we're dealing with a lot of with kids like that. And so we had to teach them how to get their hands dirty and work in the ground and till the soil and, find out what compost is and what it's used for and what the seeds do, and, just, again, getting them involved and active. And that was one of the main things that we really wanted to do, was get them active, because a lot of the kids don't do that anymore. A lot of them just sit in front of the TV. The TV has mostly become babysitters for a lot of people out here on the reservation. So we wanted to get them active. And so, next slide, please. So when we started doing this, people started getting really interested in our program and being actually fascinated by the fact that beans had to be thrashed in order to get the bean out. And this really excited a lot of the kids because it kept them active, it kept them moving, but it also kept the interest in the traditional foods. Again, a lot of times what we found out is a lot of kids are really just wanting to find out who they are, where their roots are from. And so with our program, we cover all that. We tell them about the foods. We tell them about the legends. Next slide, please. So it just grew, and we always found out that it starts with the younger kids. We work with kids as young as elementary level. And we are working with the parents. We're working with the cooks that actually cook in these kitchens. One thing we also found out, too, that a lot of the cooks out here don't really know how to do scratch cooking. And that was only because, again, for years, a lot of them were hired to just basically do heat and serve. And again, a lot of the schools out here on the reservation, the heat and serves are a lot of processed food that's not very good for a lot of the kids. And so we, again, started the service where we're going and training a lot of these cooks how to prepare these traditional foods, but also just do a lot of scratch cooking where we can incorporate these traditional foods. This also, again, to revitalize the economic status here on the reservation, we actually started buying a lot of harvest food from the desert and actually started processing it and packaging it and selling it. And we then made it available for community members and non-community members. Next slide. So you're looking at the slide of these products that we have developed. So again, it sort of just happened where, again, we were thinking, well, to make these foods more available and for people that are coming through and become a thing, we decided to open this Desert Rain Cafe where, again, we're focusing on making these foods available, but also using these foods in a different way than a traditional serving way. So we hired chefs, and we worked with chefs around the country, native chefs, to help us develop this menu. And so we focused on the menu that made it very unique. What we found out that a lot of people found out that when we were opening this cafe, they were really excited because they thought, oh, we'll have fried bread. Well, one of the things that we noticed is that fried bread is not a traditional food at all to any nation, tribal nation in the country. And so that was one thing that we were not going to serve, and we made that decision from the very beginning. And so what we did was we were focusing again on our traditional foods and using that in all our dishes. And so to have a dish on our menu requires a traditional item in that dish. And so the idea really took off, and what we found out that it was actually very supportive by the community, along with people passing through. And it's worked out. I think we're going on our 4th year, and it's been very successful, and we're growing and growing. Next slide. And out of that, again, you know, having people really interested in other Native communities around the country, interested in what we were doing here in Arizona. Myself and my co-founder and associate Tristan Reeder were asked to travel here and travel there and talk about what we did. And, you know, that was exciting for us, but we found out that it took us away from the work that we were doing here on the reservation. And one of the things that we really decided was, in order for us to help other people, we really had to still make sure that our community was healthy and could stand on its own. And what we decided to do, and what we got inspired to do actually, was to put together this magazine, Native Foodways, where again we were focusing again on Native communities, individuals in Native communities around the country that are doing the same thing that we're doing, to give hope and to give inspiration, but also to start a network for people that couldn't come to our reservation, or we couldn't go to theirs. And so we wanted to highlight a lot of these individuals and these communities that are doing good work in their tribes. And so with the idea of this magazine, we wanted it to go, you know, as far as Alaska, well, actually all over the world, just again to really highlight, but also inspire and share information of the work that other people are doing in other communities. So, you know, we Native People's magazine is available, and if anybody wanted to find more information, they can definitely go to our website. And so again, things are just growing. Things are really moving at a fast pace as an organization, and we're very excited and happy that this is happening. You know, and I myself, you know, I'm just a community member that felt that things needed to be done and things needed to be moving and happening. And so, you know, with the help of Tristan, you know, things did. And then finding other people in the community to support the idea that we had and having people come on board. And one of the things that I really like is just working with the young people in our programs. We have a program called Project Oida. And the young people that come onto this program, again, are learning the traditional ways and are growing, and when they do leave, they actually work with other programs that, again, are using their training that we've given them to help their programs grow. And so we're really excited and happy and honored that, you know, we were a part of this presentation. Next slide. So, you know, I'm excited. I'm happy to hear a lot of other programs around the country, what they're doing. I'm very happy. You know, this is not a movement. This is a way of life, I feel, and it's just a matter of having people, again, teach what our elders are leaving behind and what they want us to pick up and carry on. It's very important. And food is just one of the ways that we're doing that. You know, I always hear Valley talk about food as medicine, and I really like that. And when I visit different communities around the country, it's really exciting to hear that, you know, we're not alone. There's other people doing the same thing in their communities, and, you know, it's for our people. We want our people to be healthy. On the reservation here, the Tohono O'odham reservation, it's been shown that statistically, the Tohono O'odham people have the highest rate of diabetes in the world. And, you know, with our program and several other programs on the reservation, we're really working to to change that. And I truly believe that we are doing that, and we are seeing results. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Terrell. Bonjour, Chinoda Nikoi Indishnikas. My name is Simone Senegals, and I am the Food Sovereignty Program Coordinator at the Indigenous Environmental Network. So I love this first slide, and this reminds me of one of the little girls who works in our community garden, and she's about 4 years old. And her mother was with her in the garden, and they were watering the corn, and her mother turned away, and when she turned back, her daughter was in the corn, and she had her hands up, and she said, "I need to be watered just like the corn." And that's exactly what we want to happen, is to have those really strong relationships with our food to be there. Some of our work is CSAs, farm to school, community garden with cultivated and wild foods, community kitchen, food policy council, beekeeping and native pollinator protection, community education classes, traditional food skills, and curriculum in Ojibwe, our language, and of course partnerships and networking. So I think what I'm going to talk about a little bit more is I'm going to talk a little bit more about historical context, justice, and resiliency in relation to food sovereignty. So Indigenous peoples here in the U.S. have had to be incredibly resilient. To survive the onslaughts of the past 500 plus years is compelling testimony to our strength and resilience. If we look at food sovereignty in relation to history and through a justice lens, we understand that we didn't get into the current health crisis by ourselves. It didn't happen overnight, and we aren't here by chance. When European explorers and settlers came here, they saw a land of plenty, and they wanted it. Native peoples were in the way, especially because Native peoples had cultures very much based in relationships, including relationships of respect, responsibility, and reciprocity with the natural world and with all the living beings in it. What some people call natural resources, we call our relatives. And this worldview clashed starkly with that of the Europeans who came here, who lived by creeds such as, God gave man dominion over all things. That's a pretty big responsibility. But the reality is that in order to secure this plentiful land, the so-called Indian problem had to be addressed. To disempower Indigenous peoples is to disconnect us from the land and all the systems that ensure our health and well-being. All of the usual systems that any intact, vibrant society requires. The ways that we governed, educated, and fed ourselves, our family and community structures, our economic systems, and of course, spiritual beliefs, philosophies, and worldviews. So now we are facing serious diet-related disease and illness. The statistics are staggering. One that I saw recently, and I'm sure people have heard many of them, read that at nearly 16.1%, American Indians and Alaska Natives have the highest age-adjusted prevalence of diabetes among all U.S. racial and ethnic groups. But it doesn't take statistics to know there's something very wrong. There are few, if any, Native people who are untouched in some way by these illnesses. And so at my organization, the Indigenous Environmental Network, we are operating from the understanding that these health problems did not originate in our nations, but that the solutions do. Next slide, please. So then and now. The current challenges to our food sovereignty, corporate greed in the form of cheap fossil fuel-dependent processed foods, abuse of animals, patenting of seeds, exploitation and pollution of the natural world from the oil and gas industry, fracking and mining, chemical-ridden industrial agriculture, etc., is just a continuation of genocide, land theft, and colonization. Next slide, please. Oops. That's not the next slide. There should be a seed one after that. Here we go. So that's, oops, nope, the seed one. Back to the seed one. There we go. So that's wild rice, or monomen, which is a very important traditional cultural food for us. It's part of our migration story and why we came here from the east. Our food sovereignty program does not support genetic modification of seeds. The loss of traditional seeds and loss of seed diversity, the patenting of seeds, the criminalization of seed saving are of great concern to us. Indigenous peoples and seeds share a common experience: genocide, colonization, slavery, forced relocation, theft of family members, rape and pillage of the sacred feminine, and the disruption of diverse and integrated, vibrant ways of life for the sake of short-term profit at the expense of Mother Earth. And indigenous peoples, like seed, are connected to place, indigenous, right? Connected to Mother Earth. And our health and well-being depend upon our ability, as people and as seeds, to evolve and grow at a pace in keeping with the natural cycles of life. A few months ago, our director was asked to write a short piece on the importance of seeds for Vandana Shiva. She's a hero of mine, so I jumped around and begged until I got to contribute to the piece. And the experience of writing it really made me think deeply about my own relationship with seeds. And if it's okay, I'm going to read just a quick excerpt here. So it's just, when I was young, we lived in the city, and we were disconnected from our traditional Anishinabe food sources. We ate processed food purchased with food stamps from the corner store. We ate commodity foods from the USDA surplus program, and I didn't think about seeds at all. But when I was older and moved back to my mother's homeland here in northern Minnesota, I learned to harvest minomen, or wild rice, which is a grass that grows on the water. And before learning to harvest rice, I took it for granted. That changed as soon as I stepped into the boat and was among the rice. An immediate awareness of everything it took for that moment to be possible flooded my mind and heart. I saw my grandmother in my mind's eye, admired her ability to live in a way that demanded physical exertion and strength, ecological expertise, and spiritual connection with seed and food. I was immediately deeply thankful for the complex web of conscious beings that worked in absolute harmony so that this food could be. The water, the mud, the wind, animals, insects, and fish. In that moment, I was transported to a state of supreme gratitude and respect. And in that moment, I felt the essential relationships and connection with all life. And my questions about who seeds are and what my role is was simply and divinely clear. Next slide, please. Oh, this should be the buffalo one next. There we go. Okay, so yeah, what kind of relationships do we have with the world, with other beings, with our food? These two pictures illustrate a difference in worldview and the actions that result from those worldviews. On the one hand, we have men on the train killing for sport or pleasure at no risk to themselves, totally removed and apart from the buffalo, while the other picture shows hunters in an entirely different relationship with the buffalo. They have to know the lay of the land, the temperament and behavior of the animals in order to sneak up on them and trick them so that they can eat. And while they are the ones doing the hunting, they are certainly vulnerable, right on the ground among the buffalo. It demands an entirely different awareness of and behavior in the natural world. And the train picture also serves to remind us that the near genocide of the buffalo, the killing off of the buffalo in the plains was an intentional strategy to starve Native people out of their homelands and open up those homelands for white settlement. Next slide, please. Oops, a polluted stream. There we go. So again, what are our relationships with the world around us, and how are the systems, like our food systems, affected by our decisions? If we had to depend on this stream for drinking water and food, we might not think that the copper mine, which is polluting it, was really so important. Next slide, please. I love this one. So I remember growing up and hearing my elders say, we are all connected, we are all one. And I thought it was just something that they said, almost like it was quaint or simplistic. But what I'm learning now is that these statements are an essential truth based on generation upon generation of indigenous experience, science, and learning. I was talking with a young woman who was mourning the loss of her grandma recently, and she had a lot that she still wanted to learn from her grandma, and she said to me, how will we learn our traditions and cultures when we lose our elders? Google it? And we laughed, but it was really profound, you know. It really stuck with me. And if we are to have justice, then indigenous knowledge, science, and ways of knowing have to be valued. We're kind of at a place now where they're not valued, and only sort of Western methods of science or ways of knowing are valued, and this has to change. Next slide, please. So this is my last slide, and these pictures are from the People's Climate March on just a few days ago on September 21st in New York City, and it's estimated that about 400,000 people took part. So my organization and others brought delegations of about 400 indigenous peoples to lend their voices for climate justice and sound sustainable solutions. And it's so important to remember that the health crises and health inequities that we face have many interconnected causes and factors. So some as big as climate change, capitalism, racism, sexism, and more. These things shape our food systems. These things mean that the food we eat is determined by forces other than just personal choice. And I just think that's really one of the key things. And just how much of a choice do we actually have when it comes to what we're eating? There are factors which are not within our individual control, decisions being made by industry, corporations, and government, which profoundly affect the types of foods available, access to food, including wild foods, the price of foods, and the quality of those foods. For example, we're hearing about, that 80 to 90% of the corn in the U.S. is genetically modified, and that well over half, I'm guessing, over half, but well over half, I'm imagining, of the foods that we find in the grocery store contain corn in some form. So people are eating GMO corn all the time without really knowing it or having consented to do so. But still, this doesn't mean we don't have power. People are reclaiming and exercising power around food sovereignty every day in whichever way they feel called to do or are passionate about, from grandmas and aunties to farmers and chefs to healthcare workers, community organizers, and activists. And we've heard a little bit about from the other panelists today, and there's lots going on around that's very inspiring. And the list goes on, and it's a good thing it does, because this isn't an easy fix. Right? It took 500 years to get us here. It's going to take a lot, and a lot of people's efforts to get us healthy again. And one of the last things I want to say is something I learned from my mother, when I was really thinking about myself and my own identity as a Native and non-Native person, and what is my role. And she told me that everyone has a part to play. Everyone has a gift to bring, a piece of the puzzle. And transformative change to our food systems is going to require all of our gifts, our puzzle pieces, our struggles, and our reverence and celebration for life. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Simone, and Carol, thank you for your talk as well. You folks really, I think, bring some amazing knowledge to the table. And I think what I want to sort of start this off with is mention, Simone, I think your last statement there, that everyone has a part, whether we're Native or not Native, that we all play a role in this is really critical. So thank you so much for that closing statement. I just want to mention, folks, that we have about 8 minutes left officially on the call. We are actually going to go a little bit over in order to accommodate some of the questions. Right now, I'm looking at a list of about 10 questions that have been asked by the audience, and I'm going to help to facilitate that. So I hope you folks can stay with us as we try to get to all of your questions today. It's been a really wonderful webinar. So I'm actually going to start off with a few quick questions for Carol. Carol, are you growing heritage corn?
Heritage corn? Yes, we are. We're going, right now we're working with 2 types of corn. One of them is a 60-day corn, which matures from seed to food in 60 days. And the other one is, again, these both are adapted to the Sonoran Desert, and they thrive in the desert. So, yes, we are.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. There's a number of questions that I think that any of us can ask, and then a few that are specifically directed at individuals. But for the sake of time, we're going to try and be really brief in answering your question. So there was one question that was asked, and I'm going to actually answer it. In regards to talking about traditional food and working with the youth who may not know about these traditional foods, what's a good starting point, and what seems to be the best way to introduce the idea of traditional foods and how that connects to the land? We in our communities feel that the best way to do it is exactly how Terrell described it. And Terrell, you can feel free to jump in and expand on it. But the children oftentimes don't know the taste of traditional food, and so that's the first place where introducing it is really important. So I just thought I'd turn it over to you, Terrell, if you wanted to expand on that at all.
Yeah, no, that you got it. I mean, that's the thing. We have to retrain the palates of the young people, and the palates of the mouth, palates of the brain, and the palates of the spirit. So, that's it. Start with the younger people.
Yep. I agree, and I think that when you talk about the palate of the brain, and when some of the conversations that we have with our kids when they're on the land and their feet are, or their entire body sometimes are completely immersed in mud, it's fun for them to get dirty and to have a blast, and fun is really important for them, is to have fun, but also when talking about the palate of the mind, reminding them of their connection to the land and their responsibility to the land, and that the relationship that they have with the land. And I watch my own children, my 9-year-old and my 7-year-old, and the way that they commit to the land. They have a responsibility to serve it, but they also very much enjoy being dirty and having fun. So I think that's a really big part of it, is another way to introduce our children to the land.
Yeah,
I have another question. I'm going to just sort of put this out there, and Simone, if you would like to take a first stab at it, because I think you spoke about it at the end of your talk. From an outside perspective, what is the best approach to support the efforts of our Native communities around the nation in building trust and inroads where historical trust has been broken?
That's a big question for a couple seconds left, but I think just letting Native people take the land or take the lead. I think that there's a tendency for people to feel like they can jump in and fix what's going on, but I think just be really mindful about how you interact and respectful, and let Indigenous peoples take the lead. We know what to do.
I think that's exactly correct, and privileging the knowledge as someone who is both sits as a professor in a university and as a member of the community, I get to see both sides of it, and it is clear to me as a professor that the knowledge is really in the community, and we have to shift that paradigm to really acknowledge and support where the expertise truly is when it comes to really healing our communities. It's going to come from our communities.
Mm-hmm.
Carol, I'm sorry?
No, I agree.
You agree? Carol, I have another question for you. An audience member asked, please, some of the academic explanation of the diabetes epidemics in Native communities has been the thrifty gene theory, which is very problematic and does not account for historical trauma. Do you have more data on how the reclaiming of traditional food systems has had an impact on obesity and diabetes? If you would like me to answer that too, I can jump in. I wasn't sure. It's directed at you. Carol?
He's muted.
Sure. Okay. I'll just take a stab at it. I mean, the 30 genome theory, if you folks want to do a little bit of research on it, was proved debunked by the actual the theorizer in the first place. There's no anthropological evidence to support anything around 30 gene at all, and it's not actually a valid theory, but it's still used, and that's the problematic part of it, is that it's a debunked theory that does not apply, and there's no evidence to support it. And then the reality of it is, we live very well, and the anthropological evidence supports that. When we were on our land eating traditional foods, we didn't have diabetes and obesity. There's no record of that in anthropological records to demonstrate that we starved or that we had obesity or any of the things surrounding those theories. So as far as reclaiming traditional foods, there's been a number of studies that have shown that when people return to traditional diets, that we can see a complete reversal of diabetes and obesity. And if folks are interested, the number one place I would look is for the Hawaiian community and Hawaiian diet, the Molokai Heart Study, or the Molokai Diet, and authors on that would be Emmett Aluli, Claire Hughes. A number of folks here in the community have done some amazing research to show that when we go back to our traditional diet, that this is a laboratory blood work test shown to say that it's not just the spirit heals, but the physical body actually heals, and we see the reversing of that. So we do have evidence to support that. I'm going to pull up one more question. Can any of you folks, Carol or Simone, do you want to speak to what's being done around traditional seed libraries in your community? That was asked by the panel.
I think Carol is muted or has been dropped from the call, so I'll try to take a quick stab at it. Yeah, I think there's a lot going on around seed libraries and seed saving and seed exchanges, especially with seeds like traditional seeds that do well within a certain area. And my personal feelings about it are the things that I think are important is that when we have these seeds that we grow them out, but that's how we preserve them in situ, like actually growing them out and letting them live on the land and do what they need to do to adapt to climate and soil and all those things for them to retain their vitality. So I think that's really important. And a lot of people that I know, I just went to a really beautiful seed saving workshop led by a Mohawk woman seed keeper, and she brought a lot of the tradition from her seed saving knowledge to us, and a lot of us from all over the place are really learning about seeds, and it was a really powerful experience. I don't believe definitely in keeping them locked away in some cold vault somewhere and never getting used. I think it's almost like, that's almost like boarding schools to me. It's where you take something away, you take a seed or a person away from the land and the place that keeps them strong and vital, and want to control them and really strip them of their vitality and power. So I think that the way we do it is really important.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also say that they do belong on the land, which means we have to have land, and we have to have water, and we have to have the space. So I think a big part of it is the whole system has to be in place for it to be functional.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I have a couple more questions that have come up. How do we integrate seniors and people with physical disabilities into our programs and give them ownership over food production? Simone, do you have anything you want to respond to that?
Well, I mean, in Indigenous culture, everybody has their importance. We value our elders, so they're just part of it. I mean, we can't even do it without them, really. Just ask. We always ask them before we do things. We ask for their guidance. They're there with us all the time. They don't necessarily have to work in the field to be part of the process. I mean, they have their role to play. So, yeah, they're just already there.
Yeah, I would agree. I also, with our children and the ability to produce food, I think the ability for our children to actually be able to hand what they produce over to people who aren't able to produce it shows and help our young people also learn their responsibility to give back. And so, it's all part of that. And when our children understand that importance and that value, it helps to, again, revitalize the identity and the responsibility and the relationships that we have to everyone in our community.
So very, very true. I mean, that sense of, when little kids grow or grow things or catch fish or trap, or we did some things with little kids where they learned how to butcher down a deer and then can it and pick berries and make traditional tobacco, and they gave those things away. And that was their lesson about who they are and what their role is and how they're important, so very important to us.
That's awesome. I have a quick question in response to that, because you talked about preparations. A question came up: how do any of the panelists' programs address issues of traditional foods and or their preparations that are not necessarily healthy?
I see Terrell's back on. I'd like to see if he wants to answer that.
That'd be great. Terrell, are you able to?
I'm back on.
Yeah, great.
What was the question?
The question is, how do you address issues around traditional foods or their preparations that aren't necessarily healthy? Just examples might be of just traditional foods or foods that are even sort of viewed as traditional that aren't necessarily traditional, like maybe fry bread, or other things that have been introduced as, oh, this is traditional food, but it's not necessarily traditional food. How do you address issues around sort of re-educating people around preparation of food and systems that aren't necessarily aren't traditional but need to be reminded of folks? How do you handle that?
Well, yeah. Well, what we do is, again, we just talk to them and teach them that this is not traditional food, and this is why it's not traditional food. Years ago, I did this interview with NPR, and the guy asked me, well, how come it's not traditional food? And I said, well, traditional foods, we sing and we pray to Creator. There are special songs that we sing for certain seeds and certain foods. What kind of songs do we sing for fry bread? You know, and so, again, going back to the community, especially for the young people, and telling them this is not a traditional food, and this is where the education starts. A lot of times, you know, I always feel, way back in my mind, how can I tell someone not to cook or eat my grandmother's favorite fried bread recipe? You know, because I have so many good memories of fried bread with my grandmother, but you know, I know that it's not part of our culture. You know, I just have to remember the good memories. I don't have to eat the bread. You know, and I think teaching the young people that this is not part of our culture, or if they have to eat it in moderation. It's not an everyday food. It's a sometimes food. It goes with every other kind of what the young people consider fried bread or traditional foods. Like in my culture, they think potato salad and red chili is a traditional food, and they're really not. Again, it's retraining and telling them that this is not and this is.
Mm-hmm. Can I add one thing? For like some things that people have been doing around here, which is really inspiring, is like at powwows, you know, this is just a social dance. A lot of times there's giveaways, and people have been, you know, they give away pop and stuff like that. But there's been some powwow committees who have been doing things where, like, they give away like produce and good food, and changing our social gatherings and the food that we use, and also like ceremonial things. A lot of times, not just food, but like tobacco, traditional tobacco and traditional foods are being stressed at those kind of social and ceremonial structures, which is really helpful.
Thank you, guys. We are actually going to need to wrap up. We have a ton of more questions, and it just shows that this is something that is really a really important topic for people. And I hate to have to wrap it up, but I'm being told to. So I'm going to finish with one last question, because I think it sort of takes us into sort of the what's next and what steps for next. So the question that came is, within some of our described communities, what are your thoughts of incorporating alternatives to food delivery systems, such as aquaponics, to grow various types of vegetables? And I'll speak to this, and then I'll ask Terrell and Simone to add their final thoughts on this. For us here in the islands, we are very aware that indigenous people will and have always looked for the best solutions available to them. And the best solutions usually are first to serve the land. The best solutions would always sustain the land, and because when the land is sustained, the people are sustained, and the community is sustained. So when we talk about the best systems, we think about what is an introduction that isn't necessarily a traditional value, or reinvigorating a traditional value. It has to be a value that will feed the land and the community in both. And so with concepts around aquaponics, this isn't something that the way that people are doing it now is very different than the way we did it traditionally. There are aquaponic systems in which people are now putting them in their backyards that are fully contained units, and I support those concepts completely, that families should be able to grow whatever their land base is that they're on now, appropriate food systems to meet those needs. In the past, we had much different land-based systems, and so we had much different food systems, and all traditional systems, until we get land back, may not be necessarily at our fingertips. But if there are small solutions and inroads that we can make, whether it's a small system in your backyard or using your land in a way that allows for those traditional systems to be revitalized, I think we have to adapt to what we are dealing with now, and always serve the land and our communities first. So that's my comments on that. Terrell and Simone, if you'd like to add some final comments in response to where do we go from here, that would be great for us to close.
For myself, you know, the thing about what we're doing here is we're looking back to the past to create solutions for our future. and we're using the methods that our grandparents used. And you know, for myself, why fix something that's not broken? You know, it's just a matter of learning and keeping our traditions alive and using what we have in our area, in our land. So those are my final comments.
Just, I don't have much to add. I really agree with what both Taro and Miley said. I think the important thing to remember is that, you know, indigenous peoples and culture is resilient, and it's dynamic, and it's changing. I mean, we're not a static, dead culture, right? We're still here. We get to change. We get to adapt. We get to be resilient. So for us, like some of the technologies here that are pretty basic, but is season extension by using, you know, not greenhouses, what are they called? Anyway, there's these houses where they're long tubular houses that keep the, you know, crops warmer longer. So just some of those things, but then still in keeping with our traditional values and serving the land. So you know, changing but still rooted in those good values, which just like Taro said, if it's not fixed, don't break it.
Great. Thank you. And I'll turn it over back to David to close us up. My apologies for going over so long, folks.
What happened?
David, I believe you're still muted.
Well, it always helps to unmute the line. Thank you, audience. Thank you, sponsors and speakers, for hanging with us. We had a lot of richness on today's conversation. Let me just note that by registering today, you also are signed up for the October 15th webinar on historical trauma in the food system with LaDonna Redmond. And you'll be able, in addition, to access the rebroadcasts of the webinars that were completed prior to today. And today's webinar rebroadcast should be posted in a day or two, so if you liked it and you want to send colleagues to register for it, they'll be able to see it after the fact. Thanks. In addition, I want to tell you about 2 upcoming webinar series. We have a 4-part Meat Matters webinar series with Johns Hopkins Center for a Livable Future and the American Holistic Medical Association. And then we're launching a new series highlighting authors of prominent books at the intersection of food, agriculture, and health, like Dr. Daphne Miller's Pharmacology, with an F, and Ted Genoway's upcoming The Chain, Farm, Factory, and the Fate of Our Food. So thank you from Healthy Food Action. If you visit our website, healthyfoodaction.org, you'll find more resources on topics like these, and we look forward to hearing and climbing on the webinar with you on October 15th. Thanks again.